We are doing our very first ever dual live. Whoop, whoop. No better person that I would want to do a dual live with than my dear friend Kristy. So she is with us in Cali. She's in California. I am in Michigan. And we are jumping on with you guys today for the second episode that I have recorded with Kristy for Sunny Side Up. And if you guys remember, Kristy Sidlar is the author of Change of Heart Memoir. It is a book about her journey of getting a new heart and what it looks like, feels like, what it means to live with a heart condition and need a new heart. And so, our first episode together, I am going to encourage you to go back and listen to that one. You can find the link on Spotify. You can find the link on my website. I'll link it in this episode. So go back and listen to that first one because in that first one, Kristy doesn't know who gave her the heart. When Kristy receives this new heart and has a heart transplant, we're all celebrating, we're all cheering, knowing that she got a new heart. But at that point, she didn't know who the heart was from. And so today's episode, you guys, she is going to share with us her journey of finding out who that beautiful human was, um, how that has impacted her life. And also, this is really important. We are airing this episode at the end of April. And that's really significant because April has a really special meaning. And I'm going to let Kristy tell us about that special meaning. So, without further ado, welcome to the Sunny Side Up podcast for the second time, Kristy. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, thank you. And yeah, I love that we're doing it for National Donate Life Month, which is just
Yep.
wrapping on April. Yeah, there's just so much to say. I don't know where to start, but I will since I just mentioned National Donate Life Month. Let's start there. I knew when I got on the heart transplant list that I was one of 3,000 people who would
Mhm.
be waiting for a heart in the U.S. And hearts are pretty hard to come by. But I've done so much research on this topic since then. And if I, think about where we are at the end of National Donate Life Month, there are over 100,000 people on the transplant list right now for kidneys, for livers, for pancreases, for hearts, for
Mhm.
lungs, for multiple organs. Some people need multiple organs. I was almost at the point of needing a liver and a heart. Excuse me, a heart. Um, so there is a huge, huge, huge need.
Mhm.
And I think most people think somebody has to die to become a donor. And certainly in the case of a lung or
Mhm.
heart, that is the case. But there are so many amazing stories of living donation and recipient stories. I've got a really good friend who his brother-in-law donated a portion of his liver to my friend who needed a new liver. And the story of him telling me how I've never been pregnant, so I don't know what this is like, but for a parent who's got a living human inside of them, and you can feel the baby kicking and feel the baby growing. He said a liver, you get about a third of the person's liver. Um, he was watching TV and he could feel the liver regenerating and growing inside his body. They
Oh
grow
my gosh.
within a matter of months. He had a full size liver, so you can imagine how quickly. But the living donor stories to me they're so wonderful because I every day I want to thank my donor. I want to thank her for saving my life, and I can't do that. But I think about people who donate a kidney or donate
Mhm.
a liver. You get to look that person in the eye and say thank
Mhm.
you. I mean, that to me is just like there. I just think that's the most wonderful way to be able to honor somebody daily is to be able to thank them for giving you a new lease on life.
Yeah.
Uh, I of course didn't have that opportunity because my donor was a heart donor, and I was the recipient of her organ. She's no longer alive. Um, but it was interesting when my transplant was about 3 years ago. It was in March of 2021. And just backing up, I won't tell the whole story from the first podcast, but I had been in heart failure for, probably advanced heart failure for probably a year and a half, heart failure for probably 5 or 6 years, but had been diagnosed with a condition. It had been over 20 years that I was living with this rare heart
Mhm.
condition. And when it was time for me to go on the transplant list, I went on the list on a Tuesday, would have been March 9th, and I got the call on March 10th. I mean, I was on the list for 1 day. That just doesn't happen to people.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And then the next morning, I was in the OR getting my new heart. And when I, kind of remember coming to the first few days were a little bit foggy. It's funny, if you read my book, you'll see most of those chapters were actually dictated to me by my husband, and then I wrote them down because I didn't remember most of the first couple of days. But I do recall when I came to, and I had this vision. I mean, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I have somebody else's heart in my body. Like, I'm alive. This
Mm-hmm.
I came through, but I remember thinking, I have somebody else's heart inside my body, and immediately went to this vision of. I thought to myself, I think this is. I feel like this is like a mid-30s woman. In my head, she lived in like Appalachia. I don't know where that came from, but somewhere kind of in West Virginia, North Carolina, that came to my head. I also had this vision that she had kind of a rough life. I don't know why, but that just I had this feeling that she, maybe didn't have some of the privileges and the ease that some people have in life. Don't know any of that to be true, but those were just that's it was just strange. That's the first thing that came to. So let's fast forward, since you teased the audience with the story. So I got home from the hospital, um, and within probably a couple weeks of my transplant, I knew I wanted to write my donor's family a letter. And I mean, think about it. Like, that's, how do you put into words your gratitude for something that changed your life like nothing else can, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
but to balance that with somebody's absolute grief. I mean, here are her parents, maybe her children. I didn't know it was a she at the time, but
Yeah.
this family left behind, and here I am celebrating. I mean, it was a really tough thing to put into words. And I wrote it and I rewrote it and I rewrote it and I read it to my mom and I read it to Dave and I rewrote it again. And I finally got to something that I thought was appropriate to send to them. And then I didn't hear anything back, and I didn't know if I would. I remember my dad kind of level setting me, saying, this is a lot for them to take in. It may be months or years before you hear from them, but he was really confident that they would. So I then contacted the donor organization and did find out that it was a female, and
Mm-hmm.
she was mid-30s. So kind of crazy that I had those two premonitions. But that's all I knew. They wouldn't tell me birth date. They wouldn't tell me where, what happened. No backstory. So I just, I wondered. And every day, I mean, I thank my donor's family. It's part of what I do. I mean, I'm alive because of her and because of them. Side note, just back to National Donate Life Month, when you choose to be an organ donor, which in the state of Michigan is as easy as going to the DMV or the Secretary of State,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and checking the box and your license. Some states you can just do it online. As a matter of fact, I know Florida, you can just go online and choose to be an organ donor that way. But even if you are an organ donor, just so that you know, and I would encourage you to have this conversation with your families, the family still has to consent. So, fortunately, my donor, who checked that on her driver's license, had also probably had that conversation with her family, because the family can't actually deny it. So, if it's something that's a strong wish of yours, please make sure you have that conversation with your loved ones, so that they know that that's what you want to have done with your organs. But anyway, fast forward. So I continually giving thanks to my donor. Later on that first year, it was Thanksgiving. I wrote a second letter, and I remember that was the first day I had gotten in the pool. I was for a triathlon, and just that whole concept of, because of this woman, because of her family, I was able to get back in the pool and do these things that I love to do from a physical athletic perspective. So that was letter number two. I probably every year wrote 2 or 3 letters. I would always write something on the anniversary of my transplant, usually at Thanksgiving, and then maybe one other time. And now the years are going by, and I hadn't heard back. And I had reached out to the donor organization and said, do I know that they're receiving my letters? And they said, yes, we will let you know if they decline them so you don't keep writing them. So I thought, okay, that was good.
Mhm.
So this past February, and it was actually on National Wear Red Day, which is the Heart Association's awareness day for women's heart health. I got home from my date night with my husband, and I was grabbing the mail, and there was a letter from Gift of Life, which is the Michigan Donate Life organization. And it was a form letter. And so I remember looking at my husband and I said, this is going to be the letter that says they are declining my letters. They don't want to hear from me anymore. And I opened it up and out fell this piece of paper that was handwritten from my donor's aunt. And the reason, I think, one of the reasons why it took so long, I know it's a lot to take in. Um, I would read about two sentences and I would cry and I would gather myself and I'd read about two more. But the I think the reason why it took so long is the letter came from my donor's aunt because both of my donor's parents had passed before my donor died.
Okay.
And I don't think there's a partner or a husband or a spouse in the picture based on what I
Mhm.
got from in the letter. So those would be the people that you would probably most likely think you would hear from, a parent or a spouse. And so I think it just took this family a while to get to the point of writing. But I did find out that her name is Angie and she had three children and she's got three aunts and she has a sister. So there was a little bit of information in my letter. It was cute. She wrote a couple things about her being very spunky, um, but not a ton of information. But now we're connected in this way that we never were before. And now when I put my hand on my heart and I thank my donor, I can thank Angie. I mean, I can actually call her by name. And
Mhm.
probably the best part was at the end of the letter, it's signed by the aunt and it's signed, Love your extended family. So to me, that was just like, wow, like because the letter was kind of short and I felt maybe she just wants to kind of write me off. But I don't know, there was something about that closing that just gave me some hope. So the next step is I wrote back to the donor organization and I gave a consent form for them to be able to reach out to me directly, and if they choose to do the same, then we don't have to go back and forth through the donor organization. We can actually communicate, one to one. So we'll
Mhm.
see. I haven't heard anything back. It's been a couple of months, but again, it's a little bit removed from Angie just because it's an aunt. But I'm hoping that, I just more than anything, Alicia, I want to help the kids. I think I want to find out about them. They could be. If she was 37, they could be littles, they could be in college.
Mhm.
Like I have no idea. They could be, close to being adults. Um, so I just that's that, and I want to know her birthday. I want to be able to honor her every day or every year.
Mm. Oh my gosh. It kind of leaves me a little speechless. Well, processing, even though I've actually heard you share that story, because Kristy has recorded with other podcasts as well, and Kristy has openly shared her story. But every time I hear it, I hear a new part of it. I think it's so emotional. And the kid piece of it, you think about, a 37-year-old mother. Um, oh my gosh, just how the legacy continues of what you mean to this family, and that your heart, your beating heart inside of your body is an extension of her. And the fact that you knew instantly that she was in her 30s and that it's like, to me, in my line of work, I'm reading a book. I just started it called The Body Keeps Score. And to me, it makes so much sense when you think about all the things in our life that the body holds on to, the heart, the liver, the lungs, and how each organ in our body has a different emotion. And we're not separate from our body. The physicality of our body, the emotional, the mental, like it's all connected. And here you are, Kristy, with everything you've been through in a lifetime, everything you've endured, and now, everything that Angie has endured in her heart, in your body. Like, that's mind-blowing to me.
It's heavy.
It's
It's a lot.
just
I
incredible.
you're right. I carry on another human's legacy, history, uh,
Mhm.
her soul. I mean, I read a book, which is just a phenomenal book, although it sounds really weird, but it's called Stiff: The Curious Life of the Human Cadaver. And it's a book by, and she's a medical doctor, but she's an author, and she's very, very, very funny. So for as awful as that title sounds, but it is a book about all the ways human cadavers are used. So from understanding what happens in a plane crash, to medical students using cadavers, to understanding how, body composition for solving a murder mystery, whatever. I mean, it's a fascinating book, and she's really, really funny. But I remember I read this book probably 20 years ago. There was a chapter on organ transplantation, particularly heart transplantation, because there's such a connection between heart and soul. And what happens when you get somebody
Mm.
else's heart? Are you just getting an organ? Are you getting other pieces of them? And interestingly, I just got a call a couple months ago from somebody at Psychology Today who interviewed me. She's doing an article on
Okay.
organ transplantation, particularly heart transplantation, and taking on either personality traits of your organ donor, or any other behavioral characteristics or tastes, likes, dislikes. So I can't wait to see the article and see if I'm assuming she's interviewing other people. But I have been asked that quite a bit. Like, do you think are you any different? And that's such a loaded question. Am I different? Hell yeah, I'm different. I mean, I was on death's doorstep before, and now I'm, working out
Mhm.
6 days a week, and I'm just feeling amazing. But on top of that, it's funny, in the beginning, people did notice some different traits in me, and I still don't know. In the beginning, I chalked it up to, hey, I'm on all these meds. Like, I was on prednisone. It's a steroid. It can make me cranky, and um, one of the things that my some of my close friends said right off the bat, like, wow, you got a potty mouth all of a sudden. Like, I do think, and I don't know if it was like, maybe she did and now I do,
Mhm.
or if, again, it could have been the drugs. I was just a little bit more maybe direct and maybe irritable. um but I also, I think about some things that I did in my life. I think I just realized that, I don't know, I'm less tolerant of bullshit.
Mhm.
I think when you have such a big life changing experience like this, did I take on a trait of hers? Maybe. Or did I just say, listen, I don't have time for stupid stuff anymore. And I mean, I ended some friendships that weren't serving me. I, had some
Mhm.
mind shifts that, just are bringing me more joy than they were before. So I don't know. I'll never know if who I am now has any effect of who I came from as far as my donor, or if it was a huge life changing experience. But choose your own adventure, right?
Right. Well, it's truly a miracle. I can't think of a better word for what you've been through, what you've survived, right? Because we have to use that word too. And then where you are now with this heart. And do you believe that, if we think about our purpose in this life, and we think about why we're supposed to be here, and it's a lot of reasons. None of us just have one purpose per se. Um, I just can't help but think that all of this led to where you are now, and that is a part of your purpose, and that as this continues to unfold, Angie's family being a part of your purpose. And like you said, you mentioned at the beginning you've never been pregnant, but maybe that was never God's intention for you to be pregnant. Maybe your extended family didn't come from your womb,
Yep. I,
right?
trust me. I mean, I want to get to know these kids in the worst way, and I've always, throughout my life, I have so many adopted children. That I do
Mhm.
agree that I've been able to impact a lot of young people in other ways. And man, if it could be these three additional kids somehow,
Right.
kids, whatever they are, but these humans who no longer have their mom, but could have me in some capacity. It would just be really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. So I love that angle of, your spunkiness and, how this has changed you. And I think that's really inspiring. I know it's inspiring to me, and I know it's inspiring to anyone listening that we can all reach a point in our lives. We can all have something really substantial or big happen where we go, it's time to make those changes. It's time to say goodbye to those relationships. It's time to open that next chapter, and it doesn't have to be anything as grand as getting a new heart, but maybe asking yourself right now, listening to this, is there something monumental that's happened, or is there something, a chapter that's closed that I need to pay attention to, because these things happen in our life and they get us to think about those moments. Now, did that same thing happen for your husband? I mean, throughout this whole journey, with you now knowing that Angie's heart is inside of your body, how has that affected him? How has that impacted your marriage?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with Dave. I mean, Dave is just an amazing human. He's, again, read my book. I have more people who want to meet Dave after reading my book than they care to talk about me. I mean, he's such a cool dude. I think that the thing about Dave and why I think we're so good together is that we feed off of each other. And I think his big thing throughout the whole pre-transplant transplant process was, if Christy's okay, I'm okay. Like I wasn't nervous this. I wasn't a worrier. I wasn't doom and gloom. I was so excited to get this new heart, have this new lease on life. I was totally confident in my doctors. Like I know it's really hard for people to believe, but I was literally like fist pumping going to the OR. Like I was not nervous. I was not, again, I say it and it's almost unbelievable for me to, I truly was just, I was not scared.
Yeah.
Uh, so Dave picked up on a lot of that. I mean, I think, people would ask him when I loved it, how are you doing? Everybody's worried about Christy, but Dave, how are you doing? And he's like, listen, if she's good, I'm good.
Mhm.
So I think he rides off of my vibe. But I do, one of the things I remember, it was the night I got back from the hospital. And we were lying in bed, and I think he put his hand on my heart first, or maybe I did, and then he put his on top of mine. But again, before my transplant, my heart was so weak. My resting heart rate was probably in the 40s. With a transplanted heart, they work very differently, so they beat much faster. I've got some nerves severed, so things don't necessarily connect the way they normally would. And when I work out, for example, I have to walk for 10 minutes before I run because my heart doesn't know it's supposed to beat faster. I have to wait for the adrenaline in my brain to get to my heart. So things are just different the way it works. So we're sitting there and we're feeling my heartbeat, which was now over 100 beats a minute resting. So to feel physically how fast it was beating, but how strong. And I remember we both just went, oh my God, like it's healthy. Like I'm healthy for the first time in 20 years. And so I think, that's probably one piece. We saw this new lease on who I could be. But I think,
Mhm.
to be really honest, and I'll get a little vulnerable here for a minute, but there have been times as far as our marriage goes, Dave, I mean, Dave and I are that like that sickening couple who love to spend all of our time together, and we just we're that couple. But when we in the last year or so, I've really gotten back into physical fitness and training a lot, not training for anything but just training my body. And I remember we had a conversation, and he's like, you put working out first. I think there were times when he might have felt like I was putting that in front of doing things with him. And one of the things that was a real awakening for him, Dave, but you have to think about, when something's been taken away from me for 20 years and I have it now, like damn straight I'm going to do it every day. So
Mhm.
that was an understanding we needed to come to, that maybe there were days that I would make sure that I would work out before I would make us dinner or whatever it is. But that was probably one adjustment of this new me, being able to have something that, I was super athletic before. I mean, I was diagnosed when I was training for a triathlon. I mean, I was really athletic. And then all of a sudden, my diagnosis told me that I could not work out.
Right.
So, like that taken away, and now be able to have it back. So that's, those are probably just a couple snippets into our married life, our salacious married life. that that have been a result of the transplant.
No, I'm happy you brought that up. And I think that is so important, that vulnerability of as soon as you said it was taken away from you. There's no way you can't be a new version of yourself, and so Dave is essentially married to this new version of Kristy, and knowing Dave like I do, he will embrace it, and he is embracing it. um Also, what you said made me remember something really special that you did, when you got the heart, on your body. Will you share that?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So it's funny. I was reaching for my phone to be able to show a picture. I'm like, well, I'm on the phone for the live, so I can't show you the picture. Um, so it was probably 8 months after my transplant. I got a tattoo on the back of my neck. So you won't. Oh, what the heck? I'll just turn around. I think you can see it. Can you
I think
see it?
we can see it. Okay, you have to come close, turn to the camera. We can only see your arm right now. Okay, swivel, swivel. Okay, swivel, keep swiveling other way to your right. Yep. Okay, now pull your shirt down just a little bit.
All right, hang
Okay, we
on. That's
we, we
like
we've got the gist. Swivel to the right a little more.
all right. So without making these people suffer.
Yeah.
Um,
We
so what?
saw it. We saw a glimpse. Yeah.
So it is my old heart rhythm, which was shit, like looked terrible. And then my new heart rhythm, so Angie's heart rhythm
Mhm.
and Steve's heart rhythm, and then there's a heart kind of engulfing it. And super, I mean, super meaningful for me. Like I loved it. And I also do have this one I can show easily, but I also have the red dress, which is
Mm.
the Heart Association's Go Red for Women movement tattoo. I got that one years and years ago. But with my tattoo that I have, which I love, and Dave has the same one on his arm, mine has a little altercation now because or alteration now because once I got to know who my donor was, the very peak of my tattoo, I went in and got a line, and so now it says Angie.
Yeah. I
Angie.
love that. I love it.
I tell you, it's so funny. My tattoo artist, I'm like, dude, I have a 20-second job for you. Literally, I
Yeah.
can't find, but now mine is able to represent the A for Angie, which I
It's
just
so cool. I love that so much. I love
yeah,
that so we did get to see a little peek of it. And I think you have, if you follow Kristy Sidlar on Instagram or Facebook, I know you've posted a picture of it. Now, will there be a second book? And maybe a picture of the tattoo will be in the
yeah,
second book?
yeah, probably. So couple things. I with my book, although a lot of it is my journey and my story, I do have the back part of the book is about something I created, which is called a wellness widget. And it's looking at 6 different dimensions of wellness that I really believe I wasn't consciously living my life with these 6 dimensions of wellness, but I realized that between physical, emotional, social, financial, spiritual, and vocational wellness, like I had just been doing some things right, so I wanted to share that with the world. But it was pretty high level, pretty scratch the surface. So I am intending to partner up with a PhD psychotherapist, to go a little bit deeper into some more practices and how you can really get into those 6 different dimensions and the psychology behind it and how you make changes. But one of the things I will say,
Mm.
and another way that Angie has impacted me, I do a lot of speaking on this wellness widget and just ways to make change. And so I've got different, whether it's accountability groups or doing things in incremental changes and not quitting cold turkey and rewarding yourself and some of the things that I think a lot of people talk about. But one of the things that has been most impactful for me as far as making change and what I love to share with others is what I call purposeful dedication. So, when I was coming upon my first anniversary of my transplant, I knew that, again, I didn't know her name was Angie at the time, but I knew my donor would have been 38 years old. And I wanted to do something really special to honor her and her family. So I thought for 38 days, I'm going to exercise for 38 minutes at least. And I'm going to do a 38-second, very specific meditation to her and her family. And at the end of my 38 days, and this was now 2 years ago,
Mhm.
I cannot work out for less than 38 minutes. I can't do it. I mean,
Wow.
in honor of her.
Mhm.
So I've talked to a lot of people about this concept, and I remember the first convert I had was a friend of mine who was really trying to do more meditation and just some quiet reflection. And I knew her brother had died, and I said, "Jen, how old was your brother when he died?" And she didn't even finish her sentence. She goes, "Oh my God, that's it." She said, "For 8 minutes a day, Monday through Friday, 8 times 5 is 40. I'm going to lock
Mhm.
my room." And I'm going to have quiet time and I'm going to meditate. And she to this day still does it. I got her little wooden eight. She hangs it on her door. It's time. That's mom's time. I've got another friend who adores her grandmother, who was the best card and letter writer ever. And my friend's been trying to connect with more people. So her grandmother is 103. So for 103 letters or cards or notes of encouragement this year, she's sending to friends and people she wants to connect with. So what I encourage people to do is if you're having a hard time, making a change, committing to something and doing something differently, think about somebody that you would want to honor in your life. It could be your 5-year-old son, it could be your 30-year-old favorite teacher. And 30 doesn't need to be days, it doesn't need to be hours, it can be 30 seconds. When I walk to the refrigerator, I'm going to think about why am I going to grab that snack? For 30 seconds, I'm going to pause and think about my favorite teacher. And then maybe you don't go to the fridge and get that snack. But if you think of somebody to honor, I just believe that it's way too easy to disappoint us to disappoint
Mhm.
ourselves. I mean, you can set yourself up for failure all day long. That's just me. I'm just disappointing myself. But if you think about somebody that you really care about, it's really hard to dishonor somebody that you're making a commitment to, unlike us being able to let ourselves down all the time. So I don't know, that 38-minute thing, I don't work out every day, but 6 days a week, and I cannot stop before 38 minutes. Stuck with me.
That is amazing. I love that so much. What did you call it again?
Purposeful dedication.
Purposeful dedication. Every single one of us could think of something right now for that.
I mean, and it doesn't need to be somebody who died. I mean, it can be
No,
somebody in your life that's meaningful. Again, it can be your child. It can be, I mean, I've had people do, I'm going to run this many miles in honor of my whatever. I'm going to do this many push-ups in honor of whatever. I'm going to stop doing this many minutes a day because I mean, it's really universal. I mean, it doesn't have,
sure.
you think it's got to be physical because that's what I did, but it can
Right,
be anything. And you just
right,
find somebody that matters.
right.
Try it.
So my mom lost her sister and her mom in a short window of time. And she told me recently that she hasn't really processed the grief of that. We're really good at shoving grief down. And so I said to her, I said, "Mom, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? And what would be a way you could celebrate their life that when you had that act of joy, it would make you smile thinking about them?" And she said to me, "I love getting cards in the mail. That brings me joy. And, I love getting a birthday card. I love whatever." And I said, she lives in a senior community where she lives, the building that she's currently in right now. I said, what if you once a week, couple times a month, you started collecting like this big box of cards and you got all the seniors at, where you live, and you just said, today is the day we're going to write some cards to people we love. Maybe it's somebody we haven't talked to in a really long time or whatever. Like, so kind of in memory of your sister, in memory of your mom, you're doing something that brings you joy. And what you just mentioned made me think of that. There's no hard number to it, but it's this transactional, not even transactional, that's not the right word, but just putting into motion. Um, I just love it. I just love it. So I wanted to share that example.
Yeah, I mean, it fits perfectly. And I mean, if she, again, if it's two people that she lost, maybe she does two a month.
To
It's
a
a
month, right?
easy
Yeah,
goal. Could say, listen, they were, X age, and with all of my community members over the course of 1 year, we're going to send out that many cards. And so she gets to
right.
December. Oh my God, I have three more to send, but she
Yeah,
gets it done. I mean, I don't know,
yeah,
there's power in being held accountable to a special person, a special memory. something that's meaningful, that's not us being able to blow it off because it's just me. Like I can disappoint
Right.
myself. I do that every day.
Right.
um,
Right.
but I'm not going to disappoint Angie and her family.
No, for sure. For sure. And we should be able to make it about ourselves, but you're right. It's different when we make it about somebody else, for sure.
Yeah.
So just to make sure we have time, circle back if you would. And you mentioned in Michigan how it's as simple as, putting the heart on your license and kind of depending on what state you're in. So what would be the first step anyone listening would take to become a donor?
Yeah. I would recommend, just because there's some really great FAQs on there, go to donatelife.org.
Okay.
If you want to put that link in the chat as well.
Okay.
Um, some really good questions. But I think a lot of people think, well, am I too old? Well, no, because you're not just necessarily okay. Maybe you're too old, or maybe maybe your lungs aren't in great shape, or it's not that you have to be able to donate everything. You can donate a thing, and what a lot of people don't realize is that a donor, can help up to 75 people. You think, well, God, I've only got a few organs. Yeah, it's not just organs, it's cornea, it's tissues, it's nerves.
Mhm.
So any age person can have something, skin. I mean, it could be, anything that can help somebody else.
Okay.
That's really important to know, that there is no age limit on being able to be a donor, because some people are like, oh, I'm too old. I'm past my prime. That's not true, because you can still help someone.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of great information on the donatelife.org website about, does ethnicity matter? Does gender preference matter? Those things don't matter. I mean, there is no limit, other than if an organ is not in good enough shape to be donated, they won't donate it. When I got the call that they had a heart for me, they still had to go through a ton of testing with that heart to make sure that it was viable to go into my body. So, there are teams of doctors who are checking out your organs to make sure that it's safe and that it's still functioning for someone else. But yeah, then it's as simple as going to the Secretary of State, either when you go to renew your license, or just go. Just go. If you just renewed your license and you didn't do it, you can go and just do that specifically for getting the organ donation designation on your license. It was funny when I
Mhm.
from the hospital. I mean, I knew I always wanted to be an organ donor, and I mean, one of the first things I did when I got home was check my license. I thought, gosh, what if I never did it?
Mhm.
But I did, and it's super easy. It's super easy to do.
Such a simple thing to do. Yeah.
Very, very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. You are changing lives just by getting that message out there. Because it's something so many of us don't even think about, I don't think.
Well, who wants to, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
by being an organ donor means you're no longer here, and so it's
Right.
just things that it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's not something we want to be thinking about, but I think the more awareness we can raise to how many people like me were able
Yeah.
to give a second chance. And I think if somebody's hesitant, or, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I always like to say, think about if it was your sister, or your mother,
Mhm.
or your best friend, or
Mhm.
like, what if it was them, and what if you could help them? And again, I mean, I don't know if I can. I actually want to ask my doctor, but I would love to be a living donor. I would love to be able to help some. Like, if somebody needed a kidney, somebody needed part of my liver, if I can do it, and I don't know medically if I can. But there's just, I mean, sure, there's risks. But man, I mean, to be able to give somebody a second chance, and the fact that I still get to live on, uh,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's really special to me.
What kind of support groups are out there, or are there in-person conferences where people that have received new hearts or new organs, like, what kind of support is there?
So much. Probably one of the coolest things. And actually, if we've got a little bit of time, I'll talk a little bit more about this. But one of the coolest things that they do it every 2 years in the U.S. and then every 2 years in another country. But it's called the Transplant Games, and anybody who's either been they're a living donor, so they're still alive, or they are a recipient, or they are a family member, of either a donor or a recipient. They gather in, it's a different place every other year, and it's a week long of celebrating and a donor quilt and ceremonies. And then there's, bike races and running races and swimming races. But then there's also cornhole toss and ballroom dancing and trivia and poker. I mean, so you don't have to be athletic to do it. And I was going to go the first, it was about a year and a half after my transplant. But I unfortunately was diagnosed with another cardiac condition a little over a year after my transplant. And when I got the news, it was about a week before the transplant game. So I didn't go because I was just not in a good headspace at the time. But the diagnosis I got was something that a lot of transplant patients will get 10 or 15 years after their transplant. Well, I got it year one, and I was told it was severe and aggressive, and I would have another transplant. And we've since changed my medication. I've had testing since then. We see no sign that there's anything wrong. So I should be fine. But at the time, going to the transplant games, which was supposed to be this, amazingly wonderful, honoring experience, I was kind of pissed at my donor. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I had a moment where I'm like, you know what? I don't like you so much right now because you just, maybe are shortening my life. So I didn't go, and I'm glad I didn't. I would not have. It wouldn't have been the experience that I would have wanted. I will go, and I would go this year, but I'm going to the real Olympics in Paris, so it's at the same time. But I will go to a transplant games at some point because I want to be able to experience all of these people who are in this same position and this, same
Mhm.
attitude that I am. So that's one thing. But there are, I mean, I'm on several Facebook support groups that are wonderful, and especially shortly after my transplant, I had so many questions.
Okay.
There are groups all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great, a really great event. But interestingly, I mean, just because I know you in your life and in your practice, talk a lot about overcoming obstacles, and I think, so here I was, I got my transplant about a month after my transplant. I got this virus. It wound me back up in the hospital. Got through that. 1 year, a little over a year, I got this cardiac diagnosis. At the time, it was a pretty doom and gloom prognosis. I'm sure I'll be fine. And then my next year, about a year after that, I got another diagnosis of a form of leukemia, which it's not deadly, it's chronic, but because of this virus that I got a month after my transplant, it was what caused the heart condition. It's what caused this leukemia that I have, which again is, I'm not taking any medication. I get blood work every 6 months. It's not deadly. They say you will die with it, not from it. But it was funny
Mhm.
when I got to my third anniversary of my transplant, I'm like, all right, maybe this is the year I don't get some damn new diagnosis. But I
Right.
think all that to say is, this kind of goes back to my wellness widget and the way that I look at, overall well being. Like, I'm just, I'm not a doom and gloom person. I got these diagnoses. And I mean, if doctors said don't do something or you can't do that, like, I wouldn't go against them. But I'm not going to sit back and wallow and think, well, now that I have this cardiac condition, I could die of a heart attack any day. So I better just sit in my house. Or, hey, I got this leukemia diagnosis. I could at some point, get sick a lot.
Right.
Then great. Then I'm going to work out more and I'm going to eat better than I ever have. So I guess I just, part of the way I'm built, part of because of the things I've gone through. And I think what I like to tell other people is you have choices. You can retreat and let you become your diagnosis, or you can try to overcome and have your diagnosis be one of the many parts of who you are. And again, I try to live the best, most fulfilling life I can until I can't, and maybe my life is going to be shortened. I don't know. But for now, all I see is I got a new lease on life, and I'm going to be here
Mhm.
for a long time. But we all get shit thrown at us, and I got a couple crummy years of these diagnoses, and I'm great. I'm doing great. I really am doing great.
Amen. So no day is promised, that's for sure. No
No,
day is promised, and we have to live each day. It's cliche, but live each day like it's the last for sure. Um, and you're right. The whole point of this podcast, it's the sunny side up. It's finding that sunshine in the shit storms. And that's all any of us can do. And just because your storm doesn't look as big as the person next to you, it doesn't mean it's not a real storm to you. And finding that joy and finding that hope and leaning into community and finding whatever it is, that little glimmer that can
Yep.
get you through it.
Yep.
Yeah, super important. Yeah.
I mean, again, we've got a choice, and I'm not, and I talk about this too when I talk about my wellness with it, and there's a I'm not a worrier. I've never been a worrier. I
Mhm.
it's wasted energy. I mean, unnecessary worrying. Sure, there are things you're going to worry about, but I
Right.
just I think about the energy I could waste worrying, and then I mean, 90% of the time, the news we're worried about getting, we don't get anyway. And then you just spend all this energy doing it. But
Right.
I will say, and I think you and I've talked about this with your accountability group. There is a difference between worrying and anxiety, and there is a diagnosis of anxiety. So I don't want to minimize. If you have an anxiety disorder,
Yep.
if you are feeling anxious and you need to talk to a professional about that, please do get the medication, get the help, have the conversations. I'm not trying to say because Kristy can slough it off.
Right.
um, they are two different things, but I do think where you can control what you can control, um, if you can't, and you cannot spend the energy worrying about it, that's my recommendation. But again, I do know that anxiety
Mhm.
and worry are two different things.
No, and thank you for saying that because you're right. We don't ever want to minimize depression or anxiety or things like that. But I do think we've talked enough on Sunny Side Up. We've talked enough, you and I, and in the accountability group and the Facebook and Instagram and all the places we talk, that oftentimes these deep seated things that are going on in our body are a symptom showing up because of things we haven't processed, traumas we haven't moved through, health conditions that we're just throwing a band aid on, right? So it's just important to be mindful of all of that and ask questions. Just like like we did here today, even sometimes you have to ask those hard questions and go through those hard things in order to make it to the other side. And you are certainly a testament to that. My goodness. Um, yeah, just so honored to be in your space.
Oh, well, right back at you, sister.
And
I,
Christy shared right when the book Change of Heart, I think it had just come out hot off the presses at the Sunshine Retreat 3 years ago. Wasn't
mhm.
that 3 years ago? And so we are approaching the fourth annual Sunshine Retreat in Michigan. It's going to be on May 18th. And in my mind, I always think, like, I know you're going to come back to one of the Sunshine Retreats and share this next chapter. And everybody you talk to about this book is so inspired. And I've handed out this book for gifts. And it's interesting too. Like, I'll be at soccer practice and I'll be talking to one of the moms, and she'll say, my mom was just diagnosed with an arrhythmia and she's got this going on and that going on. I'm like, oh, gotta grab one of Christy's books, gotta hand it out. Just handed them out at soccer practice. That's a true story, by the way. That did
Well,
happen.
for those of you who are listening who don't know, I mean, the reason Alicia and I even know each other is
Yeah.
because of art association.
Right.
So working there, and I was a volunteer, and I
Right.
mean, our love for women's heart health goes back a long way
A
together.
long way.
I
Yeah.
know just me. I mean, that's just embedded in who you are as far as trying to help people. And the minute they say heart trouble, your old instincts kick back in. I know.
It can't help it. It's
Yeah.
in me. It's in me. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so in our time together today, is there any, I always like to end the episodes like this. If there's any one final thing you would like to say to people out there listening, and you can even take a moment, put your hand on your beautiful new heart, close your eyes if you wish, just take a deep breath. And what would that one final thing be?
Yeah, I mean, I think just because we're talking about National Donate Life Month, I really do want to give people that moment to have them just stop and think. What would that mean to them, to their families, to their loved ones, to their friends, if they were able to, in the unlikely event that something were
Mhm.
to happen to them, or we're all going to die someday. I mean, we're all going to die someday. What can you do? This is the ultimate pay it forward, right? I mean, what could you do by doing something as simple as going to your Secretary of State or going online, depending on where you live,
Yeah.
and box. You
Mhm.
we don't we all talk about wanting to make other people's lives better, be the hero, be something to someone. I mean, I can't think of any other better way than to give somebody a life.
That's right. The ultimate pay it forward. That might even be the title of this podcast episode. I love that. And if anybody out there listening has questions for Kristy, um, I was gonna shoot my email, but like what would be the best way for them to ask you questions?
Oh, you just actually you cut out for a second. You want to say that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. What would be the best way for people to ask you questions?
Yeah. You can send me an email to Kristy and it's Kristy, Kristy at changeofheartmemoir.com. Probably the easiest way. I do also have a website, changeofheartmemoir.com. And so I've got some more contact information in there as well. But I love speaking to groups. I've talked to book groups, I've talked to communities, civic organizations, I mean, you name it, corporations. I do I would have a much tighter message than what we just did for the last 45 minutes. But
Mhm.
I do a lot of speaking. And so if this is something that you think would be valuable in any groups that you're in, would love to be a part of that. So hit me up.
Absolutely. This is very much coffee table on the couch talk, hence where I'm sitting today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know, Christy, you do that. And I appreciate you mentioning that. And I actually just forwarded Christy's information to my neighbor because he's looking for a corporate speaker. So anything from like smaller corporations to larger corporations. And then we've talked about Pie in the Sky's TED Talk, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Let's
well,
just put it out there. Put it out there.
actually, I've applied to two. There's going to be another one in Michigan that I'll be applying to later on this summer. The first one was in the Bay Area. I knew it was going to be super competitive. The one in Detroit
Mhm.
get picked for, but there's another one in Western Michigan. So yeah, I mean, I intend to do that. But I mean, I've spoken to Nike and GM Financial and Kelly Services, some big companies and some smaller ones as well. So
Cool.
I think what I find with a lot of corporations, especially if they have a pretty good benefits program, it's really nice to be able to tie in the dimensions of my wellness widget to what they offer as a company. So that's been really powerful for employees to see. Oh gosh, I didn't realize we had an employee assistance program and we have this, and oh, we have some skills training for. So ways to really be able to tie in all those dimensions. So always happy to do it.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, sharing your story. I always selfishly love 52 minutes with you, nonetheless. But yeah, so I will link Christy's info in this episode. How fun to I'm not used to video as much, more so audio, but it is what it is. And I just love seeing your face. So grateful for this opportunity. And if anybody wants to buy Change of Heart, you can go to changeofheartmemoir.com and purchase the book there, right? Or on Amazon.
On like 30,000 retail sites. I mean, it's
Okay.
everywhere.
It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Okay.
But of
All
course,
right.
speaking of paying for things and buying things and supporting others, did you want to call out your sponsors?
Yeah, I would love to. Um, Thank you. Thank you for that. And it actually ties in. A fellow friend of ours, of Christy and I, way back from the days of the American Heart Association, she retired from her tenor at the American Heart Association and started her own company. And you guys all know I have such a love for entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs. And her name is Heather Kinder. And she created her own company called Creating Harmony Co. And it's creatingharmonyco.com. She is in this lovely little island in South Carolina called Pawley Island, and she is actually up to her ears in work. I know she's been very busy organizing people's closets, mudrooms, homes, just pouring her time and energy into helping people create harmony in their homes. And I'm just so grateful because she is a supporter of the podcast of Sunny Side Up, and she's jumped into accountability groups. She's actually coming to the Sunshine Retreat this year. So, yes, I want to shout out to my sponsors, but even more so than that, anybody that's a sponsor of Sunny Side Up is a part of the community. They are a Sunshine member, they are a sister. And so I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you for the reminder, Christy. The other sister I want to call out will also be at the Sunshine Retreat, and her name is Tanya. Her company is called Revolutionary Travel, and you can find her at revolutionarytravel.com. And she is such a love in how she travels. Now, Christy, I know you and Dave love to travel, so you would be like kindred spirits for her. Every single one of her retreats that she takes, not just women, she takes groups on, there's a mission component. So you go and you travel and you retreat and you have your downtime and your yoga and your relaxation, but you also have a mission component. Maybe it's at an orphanage, or maybe it's at a homeless shelter, or maybe it's at a hostel, or somewhere within the community. You really submerge yourself into the culture. And then there's also a fun element. If you follow Tanya or Revolutionary Travel on social media, you'll see that she always has that fun element to it. So just so grateful because of you ladies, we are able to continue with Sunny Side Up and get the message out farther. If anybody else out there listening to this would like to be a supporter of Sunny Side Up, you can see we're all one big family, and we will find ways to talk about your message, and how you get through the messes in life, and just how we're all one big community. So, thank you to Christy again for being here. Thank you to all the listeners, everybody that's been on board with Sunny Side Up all the way back 4 years ago now in 2020. So, I have some really amazing things planned for the future, and I'm just grateful you guys are all here for it. So, thank you, Christy.
Well, thank you. And you can tell I'm a high energy person, but I just, after talking to you, I'm going to be on cloud nine the rest of the day. So I love
Me
your,
too. Me too, girl. I just love seeing you. Thank you again.
and I will see you on the 18th. I still have to true up with you, but yes, I will be
Yes. Yay. I was going to ask you that, but I didn't want to call you
there.
out because I know sometimes plans change.
We're coming back from California on the 11th. And so it's the week after that. So I will be there.
Oh, amazing. Yay. So, anybody out there listening that wants to meet Christy, get your ticket. It is Sunshine Retreat 2024.eventbrite.com. That is a mouthful. Just message me. Just send me a message and I'll send you the link. But
Awesome.
cool. Thanks, Lovey. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Okay, bye.